Welcome to our functional skills maths lesson at levels 1 and 2 on estimating answers using fractions and decimals. The learning outcome for the lesson is to estimate answers to calculations using fractions and decimals. There's a couple of pieces of linked learning. One relates to decimals and how many decimal places there are after the decimal point. So in previous lessons, we've talked about the first decimal place, the second, and the third decimal place. And that knowledge will come in useful for rounding decimals later in this lesson. More importantly, the other piece of linked learning we've had is when we've done rounding to the nearest 10, 100 and 1,000, which we did in previous lessons. Now, the process for rounding to 10, 100 and 1,000 is exactly the same process for rounding decimals. So if I said, here's 4259 and I wanted to round it to the nearest 10, then you go to the number you're interested in, look at the next number along and decide whether to stick or twist based on that value. So because it's 9, it's higher than 5, so we round up. So it becomes 426, and then we infill with a 0. So 4259 rounded to the nearest 10 is 4260. And that skill is going to come in useful again today. So let's look at rounding decimals to decimal places. So we need to be able to round to 2 decimal places because mainly of money. Because money has 2 decimal places and some calculations you'll do, especially on your calculator, will have more than 2 decimal places, you need the skill to be able to round to 2 decimal places. So let's show you how to round to 1 decimal place and then how to round to 2 decimal places. When a question asks you to round to 1 decimal place, all you need to do is go to that first decimal place. So rounding to 1 decimal place means go to your first decimal place, which is the 0.3 here. Now, in order to round to 1 decimal place, the skill is exactly the same as rounding for whole numbers. Look at the next number along and decide whether to stick or twist. In this case, because it's a 5, we're going to round it up. So it becomes 2.4. Everything else after it, as far as decimals concerned, can be just cut off. You could put zeros in, but they don't mean anything. So 2.4 is 2.357 rounded to 1 decimal place. Let's look at the most important one now, and this is rounding to 2 decimal places. So when a question asks you to round to 2 decimal places, you go to the second decimal place. Then have a look at the next number along and decide whether to stick or twist. Again, the number following the 3 is a 5, so we're going to round up. So it becomes 5.84. Everything else after that can be discarded. You could put zeros in, but they don't mean anything. That's what you would do if you were rounding whole numbers. But because we're rounding decimals, we can cut them free because 5.84 is the same number as 5.840000. There's no point putting the zeros in. So our answer mathematically is 5.84. We don't need all those zeros. Now we're going to do a couple for you to try. We're going to round to the nearest 10, 100 and 1,000 just so you remember that skill from previous, but then I'd like you to round these numbers to 1 and 2 decimal places. So let's do these one at a time. To round this number, 4,564.257 to the nearest 10, we go to the tens and look at the next number along. Now, because the next number along is a 4, we keep the 6. So it becomes 4560. And we don't have to look at anything after that. Now let's round it to the nearest 100. So I'm interested in the hundreds. That's what it's telling me to go to. I look at the next one along, and that's telling me to round up. So it becomes 4660. rounded to the nearest hundred. And rounded to the nearest thousand, well, these are my thousands, so I look at the next number along to make my decision on whether to stick or twist. Because the next number along is a 5, the 4 is going to be rounded up to a 5, and I infill the other whole numbers with zeros. Notice I don't care about the decimals, they can just disappear off. Again, because if you put 0.0000 after it, it doesn't mean anything. Now let's get on to the interesting bit, the new skill that we've just learned. So we're going to round this number to 1 decimal place. So that's the first decimal place, and I need to look at the next number along to decide whether to stick with the 2 or round it up to a 3. And because it's a 5, I'm going to round it up to a 3. So the whole number remains the same, and the 2 rounds up to a 3. Now let's look at the really important skill, rounding to 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places means I want to round it at this point. In order to make a decision on whether to stick with 5 or round it up, I look at the next number along, which is a 7. Therefore, I round the 5 up to a 6. So it becomes 4564.26. Okay, here's another made-up number for you to have a go at. Have a go at rounding to the nearest 10, 100 and 1,000 and to 1 and 2 decimal places. And I'll reveal the answer in a minute. Don't forget to pause to give yourself more time. You need to be able to round to 2 decimal places because some calculations will give you more than 2 places. Here's an example. Jane wants to auction 8 cakes off in a charity event at a local community hall. The ingredients cost her £33, so how much does she need to sell the cakes for in order that she does not make a loss? So our two values are 33 and 8, and I need to divide the £33 by the 8 cakes to work out what 1 cake will cost. So 8 doesn't go into 3, we carry the 3. 8 goes into 33 4 times, which is 32, so I have a remainder of 1. Put in your decimal place and have as many zeros as you like. 8 goes into 10 once, remainder 2. 8 goes into 20 twice, remainder 4. And 8 goes into 40 5 times. So the cake, each cake will have cost £4.125, but you can't have pounds with pence with 3 decimal places. So 4.125 needs to be rounded. So the 2 is followed by a 5, so we round it up to a 3. How much does she need to sell the cakes for? Well, it would be £4.13, and then she just breaks above the even mark on making the cakes. Here's another example. Joan buys 3 bottles of Prosecco which are on offer for £20. How much is each bottle to the nearest penny? So we've got 3 bottles and £20. So if we divide the £20 by the 3 bottles, it tells us what 1 bottle costs. So 3 doesn't go into 2, carry the 2. 3 goes into 20 6 times, carry 2. Put in a 0 and you have 3 goes into 20 6 times, carry the 2. 3 goes into 20 6 times, carry the 2. So can you see we have a recurring number, 6.6 recurring. Now on your calculator it could look like that, and a lot of people would round this to £6.60 and get the wrong answer because they don't understand what the recurring symbol means over the 6. Our answer is actually 6.66666 going on forever. That's what that recurring symbol means. So if we were going to round this to money, we're interested in pennies, look at the next one along And you can see that because it's followed by a 6, we have to round it up. So £20 divided by 3 to the nearest penny is £6.67. So this is something to understand and keep an eye out for on calculators. Let's look at some exam questions using decimals. So round 11.348 to 2 correct decimal places. So 2 decimal places is this point here, the 4, and look at the next number along to decide whether to stick or twist. And because it's higher than 5, we're going to round the number 4 up to the number 5. So 11.35 would be the correct answer for 1 mark. Here's another exam question for you to have a go at. Let's see how you did. So there are 2 marks, so we're looking for some working out, and we have a taxi journey that costs €124 and 5 friends who are going to share the costs. So 5 into 124. So 5 doesn't go into 1, but 5 goes into 12, twice, remainder 2. 5 goes into 24 4 times, and this is where our whole number stops, remainder 4. Introduce a holding 0, so 5 goes into 40 8 times. So 124 divided by 5 is 24.8. Now, because it's money and euros, we need to put 2 decimal places in. So you need the second decimal place to get your second mark on the correct answer. Now it wants us to round to the nearest whole number. So we have 24.8, and the nearest whole number is this one here that we're interested in. So to round it, no different from before, look at the next number along, and because it's an 8, we're going to round it up. So rounded to the nearest whole number is 25. Now let's quickly look at estimating with decimals. When you have decimals and you're estimating, it's a good idea to round it to the nearest whole number. So 5.1 is close to 5. And then 4.8 is also close to 5. Nice round numbers that we can use. So 5 times 5 is 25. So 5.1 times 4.8 is roughly 25. It's estimated to be 25. Here's an example of this. Zach wants to buy 25 packs of tiles at £4.75 each pack. Estimate how much he needs to pay at the till. Well, the 25, if you don't like the look of it, can be rounded to 30. The 4.75 for the pounds can be rounded to 5 because it's nearly 5. So 30 times 5, well 3 times is 15 with our 0, is 150. So Zach will estimate the value of £150 when he gets to the till. Estimating fractions is no different. What you need to look at is the fraction itself and decide whether it's above or below a half to decide whether to round your whole number up or down. So 3 1/4 is closer to 3 than 4. And 4 4/5 is closer to 5 than 4. So 5 plus 3 is 8. So my estimation for 3 1/4 plus 4 4/5 is 8. Here's an example for you. Louisa is going to make a patchwork quilt. It takes 1 3/4 hours to make the edges, 3 1/4 hours to attach the patches, and 3/4 of an hour to apply the finishing touches. Estimate how long it takes to make the quilt. So 1 3/4 is close to 2, 3 1/4 is close to 3, and 3/4 is close to 1. Add them together and I estimate it will take 6 hours to make the quilt. And that completes the learning outcome to estimate answers to calculations using fractions and decimals. Buzzwords that we've used in the past. So decimal places means the number of places after the decimal point. So when you're rounding to 2 decimal places, you're interested in the second decimal place. So if we were rounding this to 2 decimal places, look at the next number along and it would become 0.35. Estimation is where you round numbers to make the maths easy for yourself. So 3.21 times 4.76. Well, this is closer to 3, this is closer to 4, and it's estimated the answer to this question is 12. And that concludes the video. I hope it has been of some use. If you need more work on these topics, please go to Moodle or ask your tutor.